Are you intentional about using movement in your music classroom? We're talking with someone today who has studied that and can give some advice on today's PMEA's Take Note podcast. Well, everyone, I'm Mark Despotakis. Welcome to this edition of PMEA's Take Note podcast. We are just days, I guess I should say just hours away at this point from the PMEA Conference in the Poconos. Whether you're joining us or not, today's guest, I think, is going to be really interesting for you to hear. But if you are joining us in the Poconos, you will get to hear a lot more from her. I'm delighted to welcome in one of the keynote speakers at this year's PMEA Conference in the Poconos, Dr. Missy Strong. Missy, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me here.
So I always like to tell people I would rather them give us the thumbnail sketch and the elevator speech about themselves than me doing it, because I just think you would probably do a better job than I would. So talk to us a little bit about, your background in music education, how you got to where you are, and maybe why you just even picked a life in music.
Sure. That's a question I ask myself daily.
Okay.
So I became a music teacher in a kind of a funny way, although I'm sure many, many people feel that same way about their story. And my story is one actually that I'm going to be sharing much more about in the keynote on Saturday at PMEA. But kind of the bottom line of it is when I finished my undergrad music ed degree, for a few different reasons, I wasn't expecting at that time to be teaching. But what I instead wanted to do was go to grad school. And then in that same summer, after graduation in August, I learned of a small K-8 school, and I met some really great people there, and they were desperately in need of a music teacher. So at that moment, the way my professors helped talk me into this and the way I talked myself into it was to say, I can do this for a year. It will help them out, give me a little time to figure out like exactly where I want to go to school. And here we are 30 years later, still in music education and with some advanced degrees, but none of them in what I thought it was going to be at first, which was music history. Like I said, much more background to come at the PMEA keynote. But one thing I can say with great certainty, when I graduated from my undergrad, I had a nifty notebook full of about 15 to 20 very fun activities. But I realized something quite quickly in my first, 8 hours of teaching. And that was I am completely clueless when it comes to what I'm going to do long range as a teacher for instruction, for classroom management. And I was in pretty much a panic. So it wasn't long before I decided to actually start my master's degree. But this time I was ready to do it in music education. I did it as I was teaching in the classroom. And really my intention was to better understand how and what I should be doing in the class, because I really felt at a deficit, not just for scope and sequence, but for, everything. The one thing I did well was relate with the students and kind of get them on board, but I just felt like it was hit or miss as far as being intentional with my instruction. So it was during this time in my master's work that I came across um, Ed Gordon's music learning theory, which I really kind of glommed onto and found very fascinating, very logical, um, and really that period of time revolutionized my thinking about musical development in childhood. And eventually, in a couple of years, I wanted to know more about music and the brain, because what occurred to me was if I want to teach better, one thing that's going to make the difference is to understand the children who were in my classroom. Uh, n- Not just musically, although obviously that was very, very important, but just developmentally. So not long after I finished my master's degree, I began doctoral work at Rutgers University. And during that time was music education. I chose a cognate, oops, sorry. I chose a cognate area, uh, and the specialization was early childhood development as it pertains to musical development in very young children. And since that time, I've remained quite interested in the intersection of music, learning, and neuroscience. So something, and I always put this caveat, no matter where I am talking about this, writing about it, teaching about it. I'm a dabbler. I'm not a scientist. I'm an educator. I'm an expert educator, not an expert neuroscientist. I'm like, I have a long career of studying it at my level. So I never want to imply that I'm a scientist, but uh, I really love this subject. Obviously, it was the focus of my dissertation and my work. And one of my very favorite things to do is to teach grad classes. One of which I'm doing this summer at Rowan University on practical implications for music educators of what the neuroscience tells us about children. So, as far as like my career, about the past 15 years, I've also had the privilege of working with teachers all over the United States and internationally, uh, doing workshops and conferences and courses. I have a podcast called Music Ed Amplified, in which I strive to really lift up the voice of marginalized professionals who are experts in their field, especially in education, and of course, specifically music education, although we have episodes where people are not directly music educators, but people who I really feel have such great contributions. And all the while, wrote a book, all this while remaining in my elementary general music position here in Southern New Jersey. So that's about it for my career path as of.
Yeah, and there's probably a lot of things we can pick out from there, but you're gonna talk a lot about that at the conference. I want to emphasize one piece of the puzzle that you really started off with, especially for we have a lot of college students that attend the conference. What you think your job is going to be is probably never the case.
Right.
I don't know anyone who actually it's been the case of what they thought it was going to be,
Sure.
and for good in most instances where boy, I love doing elementary general music, and I thought I was going to be the high school band director.
Right.
So we hear that a lot, and I would just encourage college students listening to this to come and hear more of your story just to reinforce that point.
Yeah, I think as in career, so it is in life. You
Yeah,
feel like you have an idea, and obviously there are some tropes in life and in parenting and friendships and relationships and in your career that do follow what you think it might be, but there are some wild deviations uh, as you go along the road. So I think the best thing to do is be prepared for um, be prepared for the wildness of the ride, because you couldn't predict
right.
what's going to happen. But if you can be open to it and not shocked by it, I think the ride becomes a lot less bumpy.
Yeah, because it's going to happen no matter what,
Sure
somewhere along
is.
the line. Yeah. You emphasize the importance of movement in music instruction, both educationally and developmentally. And there's a lot of teachers who embrace that, especially in general music. Some who might do it, maybe not embrace it as much. But I think it's out there, but maybe not at the same level for everyone. I'm curious for what you've done some work in this area. You've embraced it, obviously. I'm curious for your take on how do we do it? What's the benefits of it? What's your advice? Any and all of that, whatever you want to go
Yeah,
with on that.
sure. Yeah, and I would say, you know, if you would have told me 20 years ago that I'd be in this position of, talking about movement, in some ways I wouldn't have been surprised, because I think even as a kid, movement and dance and all those things were just a huge part of just kind of my everyday life. So in that way, it wouldn't surprise me. But I wouldn't think like, oh, I'm out there talking to people about how to do this. And your point is very good, because I haven't ever, that I can recall, come across a music educator who would say something like, movement isn't important, right? Nobody has ever said that. Maybe they think it, but they have not voiced that to me. What I've definitely encountered many, many times is a teacher who feels like, yes, I believe movement is important, but I feel ill equipped to do movement in a way that's kind of intentional and sequential in the classroom. And I understand that. How I got here, as I mentioned, I'm quite interested in what the neuroscience says about learning and musical development in childhood, right? And also the newer burgeoning research out there, which is now looking at social and cognitive benefits of movement and music for school-aged kids. So even for those reasons alone, it's important to look into it. And what we know through the research is that the science is building a pretty solid case for the benefits of movement in every area of learning in childhood, and especially in early childhood and the elementary years, though, of course, movement is important throughout our lives. Uh, what that research is saying as it builds the case is kids may do their best thinking and learning in conjunction with or just after periods of movement, since the brain is in a higher state of arousal, readiness for new information and experiences, which is something we really want in the classroom. Uh, we also see from the science that movement throughout the day improves cognitive function, and it helps with memory, which helps with learning. So that's a big area of study, memory in conjunction with learning. So as researchers, as researchers are building that case for what I think of as like a brain body link for movement and learning, we're seeing things like, for example, when moving, a child is both creating and or reinforcing neural pathways. And those neural pathways in the brain are basically the playground for learning and become the foundation for future learning, right? And these neural pathways that are being forged are for creativity, language, problem solving, decision making. We also see that there seems to be a connection between sensorimotor and cognitive function. And the implication of this is consistent, that if we are doing constant movement in school, we may very well see um, a benefit to learning in all subjects, right? And a big one to many people is the fact that the impact of movement can be seen um, on, I mentioned memory before, but like readiness for learning. So getting a kid ready to learn what you want them to learn can be greatly enhanced by movement. And now, what that kind of, when I talked about cognitive and social research, what we're seeing is the benefit on connection for students, belonging in the classroom, and empathy. And I just don't know an educator around who doesn't understand that we are in a time where these things are vital for all humans. And of course, it's always the case, but I would say right now it's really important. And of course, as musicians, we know that there is power to the inherent natural connection of music with movement, not just for these kind of things that I'm mentioning, these overall learning benefits, but to bolster our musical goals, right? So if in your music class, whether it's general music or rehearsal, rehearsal hall or a private lesson, if you can provide authentic, engaging ways to move that forward your musical goals and emotional goals and social goals, um, and you can help students be more prepared for learning in their other areas. To quote Michael Scott, it's win-win-win,
Mhm.
right? Um, and then just practically speaking, in my own program and in the teaching that I do, I kind of envision movement in the general classroom as falling into one of 5 categories with, of course, some overlap among and between them. And I try to continuously cycle these things through my lessons. So movement that focuses on steady beat and meter, movement that is involved in games or songs that have motions, rhymes and chants. Of course, one of my favorite categories, which is folk dances and social dances, like, a line dance or something that you would do at the prom. And then we have these things that elementary general people love to do, which are choreographed movement pieces that highlight form and expression. And of course, movement that helps with improvisation, freestyle movement. And I really believe that doing these kind of multiple modes of movement with students on a regular, consistent basis helps them, first of all and foremost, experience the joy of their own growing musicality, right? In a very authentic way, and in authentic music making with their community, with their peers, and with others. Um, it gives them really fun opportunities to have consistent, positive peer and community interaction. So, for example, in my school, as often as is possible, I get fourth graders to dance with kindergartners, and I bring in the first graders to be with the third graders. And then we bring in grandparents or parents or caregivers to come and make music and move with the students. So, you know, of course, those things I mentioned before, we see increased oxygen levels, we see increased oxytocin levels, neurotransmitters are being fired. And really, movement is just a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun for students, and it's fun for me. Um, and lastly, just when it comes to movement, something I've been studying and presenting on specifically in the past couple years, and it's included in one of the sessions I'm doing at PMEA, is my belief in the power of employing all kinds of music in movement activities. So moving beyond, not leaving the Western canon, but also including global music, pop music, jazz music, hip hop music, all these things as, again, very authentic and engaging ways to help our young musicians develop that innate sense of beat and expression, but also help them connect to themselves, to their culture, to their peers around them, and their broader communities in more powerful ways. So, in one session I'll be doing at PMEA, I call it folk dance with a twist, which is taking kind of beloved folk dances and using modern music as well as the traditional music. So we'll be dancing it up at PMEA.
So you convinced me, right? You convinced me of this
Right.
this value of movement. Lots of things there I had not been aware of. So I don't think anyone's going to argue with the point of doing it. But if I'm the teacher and like I get it, but I'm also like I've not done this. I'm nervous about this. I'm nervous about jumping in, literally, I guess, in movement with something that I've never done before. Do you have any advice for someone like that, or is it just the advice just do it?
Well, first of all, I would say um, definitely just do it, and do it by yourself first. This is something I didn't realize. I thought everybody did this, like, I guess people singing in the shower and that kind of thing. Um, I've learned that there are a lot of educators who themselves feel pretty stifled um, as far as movement. And so I encourage the people I work with just to move more intentionally to the music they love. So even if it's just beginning by like just moving a part of your body while you're listening to something, and then kind of dancing in a place where you feel more comfortable with it. I mean, if you can go out and find a place where they're doing like line dances or take dance classes, of course, that's wonderful. And the best thing you can do is take a course, take a training. I just did a class. This is the first time I actually did this as a full-fledged grad course, which was movement in the music classroom. The whole thing was the power of music and then how to kind of approach it sequentially. So I would say start by moving on your own and becoming more comfortable with it. Come to my, I didn't even think about saying this. I have, my social media stuff, Music Ed with Missy is very heavy with like all the ways that I love to move in my classroom. And you'll come across a lot of ideas, and there's nothing wrong when you're first learning something to just like grabbing ideas and just saying, I'm going to try that idea without that overwhelming feeling of I have to learn how to master doing intentional movement in my classroom. Do you know what I'm saying? So instead, just saying, I'm just going to grab a few ideas, here from Missy's page, and then maybe I'll meet some other teachers who have some really fun ways of moving. And then I'll go take a conference session with a couple of people who are doing that. I think lots of educators need to shed this kind of all or nothing mentality. And I speak to myself first, and then just start with doing some movement. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, well, that makes sense, and obviously we have a session about that at the conference here. So you've talked a little bit about some of the things that you're going to be doing at the conference. Are there any other previews you want to give folks that they can check out?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so in that the folk dance with a twist, it's basically just going to be it's almost like I do an event called the Family Folk Dance Night. It's basically going to be that we're going to do 4 to 5 dances. So for people who've never done folk dancing, which I'm always surprised is more than I think, that's just a fun time where you come and do the dances. And I have found without doubt that when those who don't feel comfortable just come and do these dances, they're like, that wasn't so hard. Like I can do that, as opposed to reading it in a book or something. So we'll be doing that. Of course, as I mentioned, I'm doing the keynote on Saturday of the conference, the Saturday of the conference. In that one, I'm happy and proud to be talking about the noble work of the general music teacher. And of course, a little shout out to the elementary generalist. But hopefully it's going to be a time to really encourage every single person who touches music education, whether they're, a music therapist, they're a college educator, they're a college student on the precipice of their career. I hope to encourage everybody. And then the other session I'll be teaching is called Be Musical, in 2 words that kind of revolutionized my approach to what a lot of people call classroom management, but what I like to think more of as like developing a real community in which we can forward our musical goals. And I'll be giving kind of philosophical things about that and practical applications of how I handle that in my own classroom and in the work I've done consulting and leading student teachers. And that's pretty much it. And hopefully just meeting lots of cool people and seeing so many of my favorite people who are also presenting.
Great. Well, lots of great stuff from your sessions alone, but we know there's lots of great stuff all throughout the conference for sure. So Missy, thanks for taking some time to talk to us today. And we are looking forward to seeing you, we'll just say in hours at this point, because we are getting that close.
Yes, it's coming very quickly.
It's coming very quickly. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us today.
You're welcome. I appreciate the invitation to do so, and I look forward to seeing everybody there.
Absolutely. See you soon. And thank you all for joining us on this edition of PMEA's Take Note podcast. We want to thank our sponsor, the Grove City College Department of Music. See you next time.